Well, hello and welcome to Politics Today, coming to you live from Channels Television. I'm Kayodoki Kyulu in Abuja, the nation's capital. Well, let's begin at the seat of power, just a few kilometers away from here, where President Bola Tinubal today received the report of the National Conference on Livestock Reforms and Mitigation of Associated Conflicts in Nigeria. The report was presented by the chairman of the All Progressives Congress and the former governor of Kano State, Abdullahi Ganduje, who hosted the conference when he was governor. Well, part of the recommendations in that report is that the president establish a ministry of livestock to not just end the farmers-herders clashes, but also to improve production of livestock in the country. Take a listen.
It is easy to declare a war, but it's difficult to wage it. Meaning that we have made a number of important recommendations because we studied previous attempts, the failures, the successes. We put them together and made recommendations to Mr. President. But in order to find the solution, practical solution that will provide the desired goals, you need strong institution. We recommended for the establishment of Ministry of Livestock and subsequent agencies so that various aspects of the recommendations will have appropriate institutions for implementation. We also recommend a source of funding, including international organizations, the private sector, the government itself, so many other things. So the answer we get is that Mr. President is ready to provide solution to these problems, especially pertaining to the economy of the livestock and then the security aspect of the hardest farmers' conflict.
But that's not all. The president also met with the governor of Rivers State, Siminalayi Fubara, the minister of the Federal Capital Territory, and former governor of Rivers State, Mr. Nyesom Wike, as well as other stakeholders from Rivers State also today. And they appealed to him to undertake the rehabilitation of the East-West Road. Speaking to State House correspondents at the end of the meeting, which held behind closed doors, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and former president of the NBA, Onoeze Okocha, who was also in attendance, shared insights from the meeting. He also reacted to protests in Rivers State over the appointment of Mr. Wike, stating that they do not represent the views of the people.
So we are grateful to the president and also have come to assure him of our total loyalty and support. The minority will have their protests, and the majority will have its way. The minority will have its way. It's normal. We're in a democratic society. But let the federal capital and Nigeria see the president has the prerogative to make an appointment. And he has exercised that prerogative. And all I say, let Nigerians see whether the president's appointment was justified. And I can assure you, with the performance which we expect from Minister Nyesom Wike of the Federal Capital, Nigerians will be happy that the president made that choice.
Well, quite a busy day for the president. And speaking of appointments, the president has appointed Mr. Zach Adedeji as the new acting executive chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. That's the FIRS. The president directed the erstwhile chairman of the FIRS, Mr. Mohammed Nami, to proceed on 3 months of pre-retirement leave as provisioned by the Public Service Rule with immediate effect, leading to his eventual retirement from service on December the 8th. Mr. Zach Adedeji is appointed in acting capacity for a 90-day period before his subsequent confirmation as a substantive executive chairman of the FIRS for a term of 4 years in the first instance. Also, the president today approved the appointment of Mrs. Delu Yakubu as the Pioneer National Coordinator and Chief Executive Officer of the National Social Investment Programs Agency, NSIPA, pending Senate confirmation. Now, all these announcements were contained in a separate statement from the president's spokesperson, Mr. Ajuri Ngelale. Quite a busy day for the president, clearly, but that's not all on the political scene. We have more stories trending for you, and here's your political roundup.
Oyo State Governor Mr. Seyi Makinde has sworn in 2 commissioners in the State Executive Council. They are Commissioners for Health Dr. Oluwaserimi Ajetumobi and Ms. Wasilat Adegoke as Commissioner for Youth and Sports Development. Speaking at the ceremony held at the Government House in Ibadan, the state capital, Governor Makinde urges the Commission of Health to improve on healthcare services delivery across the state.
We hope to see you bring the vibrancy and the drive of our young people, the drive that they are known for, we look forward to you bringing that to the table.
Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma has emphasized the importance of Nigerians being committed to the unity, peace and progress of the country. Governor Uzodinma, who is also the chairman of the Progressives Governors Forum, stated this in Sokoto State, where he commissioned road projects. Speaking during the commissioning of road projects in the state, he commends the state governor Ahmad Aliyu for his efforts towards promoting national unity, cohesion, as well as running an all-inclusive government.
The governor of Sokoto State is displaying national unity, is displaying national cohesion, is encouraging national integration. He is a pan-Nigerian.
And the head of the November 11 governorship election in Bayelsa State, Governor Doye Diri, has announced the 25th of September 2023 for the flag off of his campaign. The governor, who made the announcement at the Government House during an enlarged caucus meeting with leaders of the People's Democratic Party. Governor Diri, while addressing the caucus members, decried the lingering crisis in Nimbe Kingdom and promised that his campaign will be issue-based.
We start our campaigns on the 25th of this month. We are going to campaign with issues, an issue-based campaign. In Nembe, you are going to tell them that we are doing a road from Nembe to Brass.
A coalition of civil society organizations have faulted the federal government's pattern of distribution of palliatives meant to cushion the effect of subsidy removal, insisting it has failed to meet the expectations of Nigerians. At a press conference in Abuja, tagged the masses and economic challenges the way forward. The CSO said government should have put a better plan in place to ensure the palliatives are adequately distributed. They also made some recommendations on key sectors of the economy, which they believe will drive inclusive and sustainable growth and development.
The way the government has responded so far is abysmally poor in the sense that it has failed to meet the expectations of Nigeria. It has not been anywhere close.
So let's begin with our conversation tonight. Now, this concerns the territorial integrity of our nation, Nigeria, and you know how important that is to any nation. So there's a boundary dispute that is brewing again, yes, between Nigeria and Cameroon. That's neighboring Cameroon. And of course, this is not the first time. In fact, it looks like this is becoming a recurring issue. A lot of people remember in 2008, the Bakassi situation and the fallout of it, how there's still some sort of discontent with that area. But that wasn't Cross River. What we're dealing with this time around is around Adamawa State. And just recently, the House of Representatives ad hoc committee investigating the boundary dispute had to essentially put a temporary stop to that process. What exactly is going on with all of that? We're joined by the woman who chairs the House ad hoc committee investigating the boundary dispute, Honorable Benny Law. She joins us right here in our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Just before we get into this, I mean, the elephant in the room, it looks like a wave of tribunal judgment affected the PDP lawmakers. I think Plateau State has gotten the biggest harvest, if I can use that expression. I mean, it's good to see you laughing about that, but how are you receiving that judgment, really?
Well, as you well know, the ground on which the tribunal quashed our elections and our victory, overwhelming victory, is on the grounds that we had no party structure, and that as at the time we contested our primaries, PDP had no structure, therefore we were not eligible to contest. Now, the tribunal, obviously, the judges erred because we did have a structure. In February of this year, the same matter, following our primaries, was brought before the courts, a tribunal, Federal High Court, and a Court of Appeal. And all those three courts ruled that PDP had a valid structure and nothing stopped PDP from contesting elections, and threw out the suit. And so it's also interesting that it was the other parties, the APC and the LP, that got this judgment against the PDP on matters having to do with its own internal affairs. This is really unfortunate because the laws are very clear. Everybody knows what the Electoral Act says, that the issues of sponsorship and nomination, as was recently ruled in the APM, in the case of APM and Shetima, that those are pre-election matters. And also on the issue of the internal affairs of a party. What business does another party have to do with another party? And today, I'm sorry to say, my very good friend, Ali Malu, had his election quashed. So these are some of the things where tribunals give conflicting judgment. And in the same state, that on the second panel upheld the rule of law, and they said that PDP, the candidates were valid, and they threw out and dismissed the suit. Yeah. So it's funny.
It's quite interesting. Yes. You've been in the House of Representatives since 2007. That's remarkable on different grounds. With this judgment, incidentally, it came on the same day that you were halting that demarcation process, which we will get into. So what does that make you now with that judgment? Have you begun an appeal process? Does that make you no more an honorable? So does that mean you can't sit on that committee, essentially perform those functions? What kind of interpretation are you getting from your lawyers on this one?
Well, definitely, as we all know, the appeal court is the final court of ruling, and then the appeal process would definitely play a role, I believe, in dispensing justice. There's a time frame for that, and all of us, 15 of us probably, by the time they've ended this judgment, will be about 15 of us will all go on appeal. And I'm sure the appeal court will do the right thing, because the appeal court has reversed those decisions. And it was the same appeal court sitting in Jos that ruled the same division in February of this year that those issues are pre-election matters and have nothing to do with post-election. So I believe that it's nothing to worry about, but we all have the right to continue with our full responsibilities until the appeal court makes its final decision.
So essentially you continue with your work in the National Assembly.
Every member. A lot of us, are going on appeal, because a lot of members, even across the country, not a lot, but a few members, have issues with tribunals, and senators as well.
Interesting. So still on this, really, because I want to know what your thought process is, because I imagine hearing that judgment, you had to look at it, look at the situation. Do you have a feeling about what is at play here? Do you have any funny feeling? Because we've seen the tribunal. I was speaking to a candidate of your party yesterday, whom the judgment from the tribunal actually favored. So is it that when the judgment does not favor you, it is not a good judgment, the court erred, but when it favors you, it's a good judgment?
Actually, it's not about who it favors. It's about upholding the rule of law. And the law is very clear, regardless of who benefits from the law. And that's why you heard me quote the issue of APM and Shetima. Shetima, who's not in my party, the vice president, His Excellency, he benefited from that. But that was the law. So regardless of who benefits from it, I think Nigerians should learn to, and judges should always make decisions in consonance with the law. Because when you make decisions outside of the law, obviously, your rulings obviously have political undertones, then that makes it, diluted. And it's very clear that it wasn't the law that was taken into consideration, but other matters.
Well, quite interesting times we're in. But let's get into the other issue. This concerns the nation, Nigeria, as it is. And for a lot of people who are hearing this and wondering, what is going on again? I thought we were done with this one. Now we can face our issues in the country. Can you just walk us through this whole National Boundary Commission asking them to put a hold to the demarcation. What is going on, really, Honorable?
Well, first of all, actually, before now, the Boundary Commission had actually even had to put a hold on its demarcation exercises in many of these communities. Following the ICJ treaty, of course, I'm sure you're aware, the ICJ ruling, I beg your pardon, I'm sure you're aware
That's the International Court of Justice.
Yes, the International Court of Justice. Cameroon came before Nigeria, that parts of Bakassi, parts of, Lake Chad up to Borno, Cross River States, the peninsula of Bakassi, and some of our other boundaries that claimed that it was their land. The issue of territorial boundaries falls within the ICJ, between the convention that we signed, the OAU, the Organization of the African Unity, all the nations in Africa have signed, and also all of them have signed treaties, both with the International Court of Justice at The Hague, agreeing that whatever interpretation is given to the treaties signed by the Anglo-German, Anglo-French, and whatever colonial boundaries we inherited would be recognized in both nations. Unfortunately, when these boundaries were created by colonial masters, they didn't consider our sociological, historical, cultural, and traditional differences and beliefs. They just randomly sat somewhere in Germany and France, England, and drafted these agreements between the colonial masters. And that has continued over the years to cause serious problems and sources of disputes for the border communities. That is where the problem lies. However, the Organization of African Unity in Cairo, there was a declaration 1964, 1986, the African nations agreed to abide by those colonial boundaries, regardless of the fact that they were not perfect. Now, in doing so, the boundaries, there's different interpretations of where the boundary lines lie. Because the National Boundary Commission, which is the organization of government in Nigeria, the federal government, because issues of boundary in the Constitution, the powers of defining boundaries lie within the federal government, not the state or the local governments. And the federal government has an agency, the National Boundary Commission, who is responsible for the terms of reference is to demarcate and delineate our borders and boundaries and to maintain good neighborliness and friendliness with our other nations. Now, in the issue of Nigeria and Cameroon, in order to implement the ICJ ruling after it was passed in favor of Cameroon, 33 villages were ceded in the Lake Chad territory. That was, both countries agreed to that. President Obasanjo then and President Paul Biya of Cameroon had agreed to that, and the same in the Bakassi Peninsula. Now, according to the National Boundary Commission, there's some areas and communities that have not been properly demarcated. And according to them, those communities belong in Cameroon. Now, those communities are disputing that they do not belong in Cameroon because of their historical boundaries and ties, and because they've been there for over 400 years. So how can you live in a place for 400 years and you wake up one day and you're told you're in Cameroon? So that there is the cause of the problem. And also defining the boundary lines, in the cost of the boundary lines has not been acceptable to some communities, especially Michika local government of Adamawa State, the Sina Wati and Sina Wali area.
So let's get this right. The ICJ gave a judgment. Does it favor the communities being a part of Nigeria or Cameroon?
It depends on the side where the communities fall in. In the case of Adamawa State, part of those communities fall in Cameroon and part fall in, according to the interpretation of the National Boundary Commission. And that's why Nigeria and Cameroon have a joint commission. However, the communities vehemently resist that they have and they've never been, and that wasn't the interpretation of the ICJ ruling. They agreed to part of it because already, even in those areas, where there's been disputes. There are many villages and pillars that have been laid. About 46 pillars already have been laid without any disputes. But I think there are about 4 or 5 more pillars that have serious disputes. And we must consider the rights of Nigerians, because the treaty also says to respect the rights of indigents and of the indigents living in those areas. And the treaty, it says, you know, that in the when it comes to demarcation exercise, negotiations between countries could also, you know, work. And so there's a lot that hasn't been explored. And I think because of what's going on right now, it will be very difficult for the National Boundary Commission to go back and say they want to carry out any demarcation without resolving the lingering issues on clearly both the federal government and the citizens living in those areas agreeing to whether they remain in Cameroon or Nigeria. But for the most part, Nigerians, I mean, you can see that they're Nigerians.
So there's a question naturally in the minds of people. Is Nigeria about to lose land to Cameroon? Are we about to cede land that rightfully belongs to us? And they can talk about the implications of that, perhaps natural resources. I mean, not talking about the people themselves who feel that, wait a minute, we're Nigerians, we want to stay in Nigeria. But then the secondary, you know, considerations like resources and all of that. So how are you approaching this? You've halted the process, I imagine,
yes.
Or you've asked that the process be halted, but you say the Boundary Commission had already halted the process. Mm-hmm. So what is the way forward? What are you trying to achieve?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I cannot answer that question now because we're on a fact-finding investigation. I cannot, you know, we've not made our conclusions, but I cannot categorically say whether we're ceding or we're not ceding. Because the National Boundary Commission says those territories already lie within Cameroon, and the communities say no, especially in the area of Boki local government. And when you trace Pillar 113A, because the retracing of that pillar will determine the location of Dana and Biaje, from what we see, it's very clear that that should be, you know, that territory should be Nigerian territory. So it's still in dispute. We're going to involve more. We're going to need more legal experts, surveyor generals from neutral parties. We've heard from government. There's still a lot more investigation to do to arrive at a final conclusion.
So what is the situation of the people in the meantime? And I'd like to also know what you're getting from the government of Cameroon, because I imagine that they're also making moves, right? Understandably yes. So. So first of all, what is the state, what is the fate of the people right now? How long do you expect this to last for? And will they be in limbo during that process? And what exactly are you hearing from Cameroon?
Well, first of all, Nigeria and Cameroon have a joint technical, they have a joint technical team, and they have a commission. The Nigerian-Cameroon Mixed Boundary Commission, they have that. So they are working on further negotiations and further dialogues. Right now, the focus of the federal government is to engage the communities and the stakeholders. However, I must say that the way and manner and the approach has not been done effectively. The stakeholders claim that, for instance, in Adamawa State, the National Boundary Commission had told them they were coming on a visit, and they saw Cameroonian gendarmes coming, and then they immediately reacted, and that's why, in some cases, violence would break out. And so that has put the youth there permanently on alert. Some of these areas are very fragile right now. There needs to be more of our security presence there. I think that this is a very delicate issue. The government has, through the National Boundary Commission, has put in place a structure with the Adamawa state communities and the government and the state government to meet and the affected communities. However, during the hearing, we learned that they only met in June, and they've not met since June, and that last meeting did not go too well. So I think this is still a fact-finding. We're still hearing and revealing, more revelations are coming, and then we'll know what to do after that.
But it appears as though Cameroon has already taken charge. If you see security operatives from Cameroon, the gendarmes in that region, is that an encroachment, or what exactly is it?
Well, actually, according to what the National Boundary Commission said, they said that if they believe that the territory they're going to is in Cameroon, under the agreement, the Cameroonian gendarmes are to be there. If they believe it's in Nigeria, then they will call the Nigerian military. So you see, there's a discrepancy, because where Nigerians believe is Nigeria, the National Boundary Commission is saying, no, that's not Nigerian territory. And like I said, people have lived in places for 400 years, and then you wake up one day and you tell them. So this may require a very good diplomatic solution.
So the options: escalate this to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, escalate it to the President. Is that on the table as well? Is the President aware of this?
Well, right now we haven't finished our findings, but we intend to alert at the appropriate time. The National Assembly will definitely get its report across to them when we're done.
About security presence, I think it's really important for those areas.
Yes.
What kind of partnership agreement, or what do you think the people need from the Nigerian security agencies? And I'm talking perhaps customs, immigration, police, military. What is present there right now, and what do they need?
Yes, well, we visited Buki, local government in Cross River State, and honestly, we saw very little military presence. But we must thank the Nigerian Navy because they were able to provide the logistics. It's a very tough terrain. It's forest. The weather there is not easy even to fly. In fact, we had to. We couldn't fly in the day we wanted because of bad weather. Constantly there's bad weather there. But the presence of the military there is very minimal. And that's why the Cameroonians also have taken advantage. But in the issue of the Cross River State, the Cameroonians are not even close by. They're way away. They're not even close to Nigerian territory in Cross River State and Cameroon border. But the National Boundary Commission is saying they have a time limit to demarcate this territory, and by next year, they're supposed to report to the United Nations Joint Technical Team that this has been concluded. Now, they are not able to conclude their demarcation exercises because, of course, there's a disagreement between the federal government and the community. So those disagreements is what we need to resolve right now. I think the important thing in this is we need to know how far the federal government can go, because really the issues of boundaries are laid by treaties and all that, but the interpretation of the treaty is what is in question here.
Right here. And it's quite sad that this is as a result of what happened decades ago, and yes. Nigerians were not even a part of it. They were not parties to this, and then you have to feel the brunt of it. On a final note, what will Nigeria be losing if some of those lands were eventually ceded against the wishes of the people? What will we be losing as a...
It will be a huge loss. There's in Cross River State, Buki local government, there's a lot of biodiversity. Some of the world's best forest biodiversity, wildlife forest in the world. I think the timber value and all of that is in that area. It's rich, very rich in natural resources. And we believe there's more. However, we don't believe that there's oil wells there, but it's just the rich nature of the territory.
And the one in Adamawa State?
And the one in Adamawa State will be losing the mountains, the lovely mountains and the people.
Which is most important.
Which is the most important thing, yes. Exactly.
Well, we wish you the very best. What's the timeline for this?
Our timeline actually is to report back in... We've extended it. The Speaker has graciously extended it for us. So we have another 2 months or so.
2 months?
Yes.
So in 2 months, we should get something definitive.
Hopefully.
And hopefully it's good news.
Yes.
We'd like to thank you so much, Honourable Benila, who's chairing that House ad hoc committee investigating that boundary dispute. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll take a moment now, and when we return, the People's Democratic Party's Board of Trustees had a meeting today. They had some very strong resolutions out of that meeting. We'll be taking a look at the implications of that meeting, and of course, we continue the conversation on the judgments from the various tribunals. Stay with us. Welcome back to our second leg now. The main opposition, People's Democratic Party, today held its 75th Board of Trustees meeting. Well, there was a long list of resolutions that came out of that meeting, but top on the list, as you would expect, is a reaction to the outcome of the Presidential Election Petition Court. And the board says that it is confident that the Supreme Court will upturn the judgment of the Election Petition court. But that's not all. The board also said that it is monitoring the outcome of cases in various election courts with regards to their level of adherence to the rule of law and evidence which was laid before the court. Now, for context, I just spoke with a lawmaker from Plateau State. In that state alone, 4 PDP lawmakers, their elections were upturned by the tribunal. And we have a lawmaker representing Barikin Ladi, Riom Federal Constituency, my guest earlier on, the lawmaker representing Langtang North and Langtang South, that's Honorable Benila, Napoleon Balio as well, who represents Plateau South Senatorial District. And the fourth man is our guest on the program tonight, Honorable Dachung Bagos, joins us live in our Abuja studio. You're welcome.
Thank you, Kaide.
This evening. It looks like it's turning out to be a plateau affair, even though we discussed the boundary situation with Honorable Benila earlier on. But just before we get into the BOT meeting and the outcome, what's playing out in Plateau State, I'd like to get your reactions to some of the recommendations from that conference on ending, farmer herders conflict and boosting the livestock economy. And one of the recommendations was that there should be a ministry of livestock, and essentially to fix that whole fracas between farmers, herders, to boost the livestock economy as well. I wonder how you receive it, because communities in Plateau State in your constituency have also been at the receiving end. Do you think this will solve the situation?
Absolutely no, because the issues of farmers, herders, relationship, because I wouldn't say conflict, because on the plateau we don't have such conflict. We don't have anything that's called clash, but people have been killed in the farms on daily basis. On 2-3 different reasons. Number one, from the National Assembly, we've been talking about cutting cost of governance, and even the current president have talked of cutting costs of governance. Which is recent cutting down of delegation to UNGA and looking at areas that the president will look at cutting cost of governance. But in reality, on the impact, if creating the Ministry of Livestock, at what point and for who? Because what beneficial will it be for us on the plateau that we are agrarian? So if you're going to have a Ministry of Livestock, which means you should be able to have a Ministry of Farmers or Ministry of Root Crops or something to be able to benefit us, because we are agrarians, we are farmers. Now, so what really bothers us is that, look, with the vast land, with the fertile land we have, you should be able to give us what we want. And by the way, from the Ministry of Agri and other agencies, it has been able to address how it will be able to give livestock businesses or whatsoever to a lot of agencies under the Ministry of Agri. At the same time, under the same ministry, there are root crop agencies that have been able to address the issue. So looking at those policies and agencies under, be able to see how you address these issues, not creating another ministry that will increase the cost of governance. To me, let government look at the real issue, not creating a ministry that will add burden for just, so let's really look at the real issue. But creating the Ministry of Livestock, the opinion is it will definitely not address the issue, because if you create the Ministry of Livestock, what will it give? Is it the Ministry of Livestock? Is it about establishing ranches again, which is still under the Ministry of Agri? Or is it about enforcement, or what? These are issues. You have rural development agencies. So these are a lot of, the Ministry of Agri can handle a lot of issues, but creating the Ministry of Agri again, I don't think it will handle these issues as it's supposed to be, because when you address these issues adequately, go to the right, who are those people killing our people on a daily basis in our farms, arrest them, give justice to those that are being killed, get these things, and I can tell you that these things will be silent. But I have always said that I have not yet seen where most of our people that have been killed in the farms have gotten justice. So is it the Ministry of Livestock that will give them justice? But knowing the president with his desire to cut the cost of governance, he will look at this recommendation very well. But if it scaled through, Well, we will come with our recommendation for the Ministry of Farmers and Root Crops.
Quite interesting. We'll still, of course, go deep into those recommendations much later during the course of the week and, of course, have a well-rounded debate. But let's talk about, you know, the PDP. The BOT had that meeting, and as you would expect, a major part of the outcome was reaction to the presidential election petition court, the other tribunals. And by the way, we'll still have more judgments in the coming days, but particularly for Plateau State. I've seen your response, by the way, to that judgment. You began with a scriptural reference, and I mean, politicians tend to do that understandably. But what's your reaction, really, to that judgment?
Yeah, well, my reaction is that I'm so worried that with those kind of judgments that came upon the PDP on the plateau, it clearly shows that what we are suffering in terms of good governance, the judiciary really needs to sit down and look at and address judges in dispensing justice. It will be one of my recommendations henceforth that before judges go for tribunal, the chief judge needs to have a conference or a retreat for these judges to be able to know this is the law. Because when we make the law and judges interpret the law differently, it brings a misunderstanding that it becomes an academic exercise that at the end of the day, the appeal and Supreme Court now reverse whatsoever judgment that the tribunal has done. Look at our leader in Didu Elimilu's case today, that the appeal court has uptold it. Look at the governor of Osun State, that appeal court, a lot of cases that during tribunal, that whatsoever interpretation that the judges might have feel they are having, and at the end of the day, the appeal court corrects it. But before then, the integrity of the judiciary is very key. So it's something that is so worrisome that I expect, and I believe that the chief judge and the president of the Court of Appeal and senior and even the NJC should be able to bring judges together for a proper retreat. This is what we want to see. Apart from the NBA conference, I've not yet seen any retreat for judges to be able to understand the law as it's been established by the National Assembly, which is very key.
You were part of making the Electoral Act, which was really celebrated. Absolutely. You were in the House making, and it's a very interesting conversation here because the lawmakers, as the name implies, are meant to make the laws.
Yeah.
The courts interpret the law. So are you saying that the intendment of the law, which was made by you and your colleagues, was not brought to fruition in the interpretation given by the judges?
Exactly, because we were clearly stated in terms of pre-election matters that you don't have any business that have to do with any of this. The section is there in the Electoral Act.
Speak to your own particular case.
Yeah, and okay, for my own particular case, why was the election upturned after we are having 95,000 votes against 31,000 and 21,000 votes? That the election was uptold that PDP does not have structure in the state. And again, it will interest you to know that we have there are two panels of the election tribunal in Plateau State. In the same building, but two different rooms, you have panel 1 and panel 2. Panel 2 gave judgment, dispensed judgment last week to our senator and 2 House of Reps members that look. The basis at which the APC brought its petition is baseless because the Electoral Act clearly states that they are not party members, so it's interloper, just like it was dispensed in the case of the presidential election. So it did not listen to it, dismissed their own petition. In the next room, where you have panel 1, now came and said that the APC and the Labour Party that brought petition on the issue of party inter-party matters, that they have a ground, that PDP does not have judgment, they do not have structure. So it now wants to worry that 2 different panel in the same state, in the same roof, different rooms, giving contradictory judgment.
But were they considering the same cases? Or
the same cases. The same cases. They all have the same issue on ground 1. That's what. So the same case, the same issue, that PDP does not have structure on the plateau. But panel 2 But panel 2 gave out that look, PDP has structure, and it dismisses the petition. Panel 1 is now saying that PDP does not have structure, so it upheld our elections in the issue of pre-election matters. These are issues that, and one interesting thing that which the judges, especially on our own panel, is that the last and the final saying, and which the Supreme Court even gave judgment in terms of Adakene versus Adamu, in terms of INEC. INEC is the final judge in terms of any dispute within a party. And clearly, INEC issued out its exhibit, and it's part of our exhibit in this very tribunal exhibit F and G, that look, INEC testified that they monitored the congresses of PDP on the plateau, and they tendered that as an exhibit to the tribunal, that PDP had structures, PDP had structure, we monitored their congresses. So the Supreme Court, again, in the case of Adakene and Adamu, says that INEC is the final say in any dispute that have to do with party matters. Right. And here, INEC has testified that they monitored the congresses of PDP. And again, we were even taking furthermore, they took us to court again, and court dispensed judgment down to appeal court 11th of February this year, that PDP has, so all these facts are there. So we are wondering where they got that.
Two different things, that INEC monitored primaries.
Yes.
And, I mean, INEC can only do as much. Monitor the primary and then, well, get the results and move on. Is that a verdict on whether or not the PDP has structure?
No, even before then, you understand what I said, that what the party structure that the APC or the petitioners are talking about across board is that PDP does not have structure, which means that we did not conduct congresses. When the court gave that disband our executive, that we should go and reconduct our own congresses, which we did. And in doing that, we did that September 25th, 2021. In doing that, we invited INEC. INEC monitored our congresses September 25th, 2021. So INEC have those records that look, PDP in Plateau State carried out congresses.
Were they carried out according to law?
Exactly, according to law. So now they are now using that because of the judgment of SP Gang, which says that we should go and repeat our congresses, that we do not have Congress, we do not have an executive in the state. But we did a repeated Congress on the 25th of September 2021, which was monitored by INEC. And INEC, which is the third respondent in this matter, in the tribunal, gave out clearly its exhibit that, look, PDP conducted its congresses, we monitored it, and this is our report. So we are aware now, this was what INEC presented in panel 1 and 2. So we don't know where the other panel upheld that, look, that is the PDP has Congress. Even at that, in the issue of interloper, it clearly says that they don't have any business to do with our own judgment. So these are issues that one get confused that where did they get the law to be able to dampen into our own cases? But again,
so the courts, Honorable, you can land on that point, by the way, quickly, before I bring that on.
But again, what was the election tribunal sent? Was it sent as to look into issues of election or to look into issues of pre-election, which the Electoral Act 2022 has addressed?
So, I mean, it's a very tricky situation, and I'm not speaking particularly about the merit or otherwise of your case. I'm talking about the reactions that have met the judgment of the court. I mean, we see the court as independent. The court is a last hope of the common man, they say.
Exactly.
And the judgments of the court are meant to be to a large extent, undisputable. Well, they can be escalated. That's why you have courts to try to higher courts. But when you have courts, they look at the evidence before them.
Exactly.
That's what courts do, essentially. They look at the law. The judges look at the law. They get the representation from the counsels, the petitioner, the respondent, and they put all of that together and make a decision. But we're getting to a point now that judgments come out, and those judgments are not received as you'd expect judgments to be received. You have people stop short of saying, well, the judiciary is corrupt and all of that. Don't you think we're getting to a dangerous point? If we're a nation that should be built on the law, don't you think this is quite dangerous
I think what is happening has opened us up to understand more that in the Electoral Act, we need to start putting how either in the Electoral Act or whatsoever law that needs to be amended, that at the end of the day, if a judge during tribunal gives a contrary judgment that the appeal court uphold or the Supreme Court now reaffirm, there should be consequences for those judges. There should be consequences for those. So until we start doing that, judges will be very careful in studying every and any judgment. Because, look, these are elections that people have agreed with you. There is this social contract between you and I, and that was why you gave me the overwhelming vote. You understood my agenda. But the court now said that, look, the agenda does not go. The court will now give you a different person. So when after 4 years, the court, the person that the court has given you, which you did not elect, after 4 years, the person did not deliver the dividend, because definitely that is where the good governance issue comes. So the judiciary needs to understand, come together with the understanding the laws that is being established by the National Assembly. Because after all this, my review, and in going forward, because I always want to profile solution in every challenge.
Right.
My review in going forward is that the judiciary, the NJC, and so they should be able to look at the sanctions that should be given on cases that Supreme Court affirm, Appeal Court affirm, that is being given by either the High Court or whatsoever, which was wrongly interpreted.
Let me bring in this one, because it's quite interesting. The judiciary gets the flag, and most times the judiciary will never speak for itself. You don't get the judges speak and say, this is what happened. Have you politicians looked inwards? I remember the Chief Justice saying that the Nigerian political class is the most litigious. Politicians go to court for literally everything. So do you look inwards and say, well, if we had not tried to, get this by other means, just focus on elections and let elections decide, we will not have this case in our hands. So are you looking inwards and redressing that from inside before you then say the judiciary is not doing things right?
You see, the judiciary, and that's why they say that is the hope for a common man. And that's the last statement. And in dispensing judgment, and you see where the judge, even in whatever that, it closes his eyes. The hope for the common man, which means there will be dispute anywhere and everywhere. Just like you are celebrating your 35th or 50 years marriage with your wife, it doesn't mean that there were no dispute. So at the end of the day, whatsoever happens, the judiciary will look at it adequately. So mine is the chief judge and the leaders of the judiciary should be able to really conscientize judges in dispensing judgment. Because the good governance that we are talking about, Kayode, is not just about you and I, it's about getting the right people in office. But if the judiciary end up getting the wrong person in office, I can tell you the good governance will not come at the end of the day.
Honorable, you still circumventing my questions. Would we have a case when politicians will not go to court, burden the courts with literally everything? But we're talking
well, will we have that case? It's not possible, because politics is all about interest. So if your interest does not go with what it's out there, definitely people will go to court. And that's why I said that the court is the hope for the common man. At the end of the day, whatsoever dispute that it is within politicians, the court should be able to spade and say it, they say the truth according to the law.
I do hope we put our money where our mouth is, so we don't keep going round this cycle. Have you appealed, by the way?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have appealed.
So what if it doesn't go the way you want?
Oh, well, if it doesn't go the way we want, which means we need to look at the laws again. And we need to be
just
able
because
to look
it didn't go your way.
Not that it didn't go my way, because in amending the Electoral Act, we look at issues that have contravened a lot of victories.
Right.
So if it did not go, which means a lot of things need still to be looked into: credibility, integrity, morality. At the end of the day, needs to come. Your conscience as a judge, your conscience, even as a politician, needs to come into play to see that at the end of the day, we get the law right.
Finally, you put the politicians in it. But I'd like to thank you so much, Honorable Dachung Bagos, for speaking to us on the program tonight, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Well, that's been the package for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kayode Okikelu. Good night.